All right, so we're going to work on our cherry blossom picture today, and we're going to do watercolor. So watercolor cherry blossom trees with, we're going to do kind of a hazy mountain background. So the first thing we need to do is we need to coat this whole piece of paper with a very light gray background. That's going to be our background color that will fade into the distance. So this is a 140-pound watercolor paper. So what we're gonna do is the best thing for the watercolor to get it active. I've got my watercolors right here. If you notice, I've only got my primaries and the black there. What we're gonna do with the black is I've already taken my brush and I've dropped some drops of water in the black just to kind of activate that watercolor, because I don't want a lot. I don't want to roll my brush around in the black. I don't want to roll it around. I basically just want to barely tap it and then put it on my canvas. But the first thing I want to do is we're going to do a technique called wet on wet. So I'm going to take my brush, and I'm just going to coat some of an area, and you'll get about 5 to 7 brush strokes before you need to rehydrate your brush. Don't try and go too far without rehydrating your brush. You don't want a dry brush. You want a wet brush as much as possible. So now I've wetted about this much. Now I'm going to go in, I'm going to wet my brush first. So I'm going to dip it in the water, and then I'm going to barely touch the black and just have a little bit on the brush. It's going to soak it in, and then I'm going to drop it. You see how it shows up like that? We just want to start spreading this around. It doesn't have to go all the way to the edge, doesn't matter, but I also want to spread it. If you notice that it's not spreading very well, or it's not getting as light as you want, you've got to make sure you spread it out further, or go grab some more water really quick. This is a pretty nice coat here. And you've got to work fast once you start, because you don't want it to stain on you and have any lines if you can help it. You might not be able to prevent it every time, but it's a goal to work towards. We just want to get that nice light background in the back of our painting, okay? And when you want to fade something off so there's not a harsh line, just go grab some water and kind of take it to that border of where your watercolor stopped and where your paper continues. That way it's easier to fix, like right here. Gotta be careful. Gotta make sure that you're working fairly quick, but be patient. That was too much black. So I'm gonna try and work fast to get this spread out. And it's okay if we have some blemishes, it's not a big deal, but we want this to be as smooth and as light as possible. And this is just getting comfortable with the watercolors. All right, now that that's done, we need to let it dry, or if you have a blow dryer or a heat gun, don't put too close before we can go on to our next step. So watercoloring, this is a layering project, so we need to do things in layers. So we've done our background, now we need this to dry, and then once this is dry, we can go on to the next step. now that our paper is dry enough, it's a little damp in some spots, but it's dry enough. We're gonna focus on this area right here. We don't wanna go too high. We wanna stay in this area, and what we're gonna do is put in kind of our furthest set of mountain ranges in the background, or forest lines, whatever they may be, in that foggy distance, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do this kind of the same technique. I'm gonna wet my brush, okay? I'm gonna wet my brush and then dip it into the black, just the water of the black, and get just ever so lightly. We want this to be a shade darker than what we have here, but we still need it to be very light. We don't want it to be black. We want it to be just a shade darker than what we have. We're gonna do 3 layers of mountain ranges. So a little bit of water, a little bit of water from the black, and then I'm just gonna keep all my strokes in a vertical motion. And again, we just want it to be this light sort of background going on. And we're just going up and down, and I'm gonna grab some water, fade out the bottom, because I don't really care about the bottom right now. I want that silhouette. So that silhouette of a image of a mountain range or forest line. See, too much black. If you ever put too much black on, that's when you go in and grab some water really quick. And some of this might get covered up by another layer, but we don't know that for sure, so we're just going to continue, try to fix any mistakes that may occur, and try to alter the size of your mountain ranges. Okay, and then I'm just kind of fading off to the bottom here. It's ever so light, you know, in the background. So nice and light. And I don't want to go all the way across. I want to go about, I'm probably going to stop about there. I want to leave a gap in the middle. So I'm going to go over to this part next. And do the same thing, same shade, right? Keep the strokes going up and down. Remember, we want to have a pretty good gap at the top. We don't want to go too high. But if we think about it, the mountain range is going into the background. Depending on our view, they're probably going to be lower or right at our vanishing point. So we don't want to make them too high like we're standing on the ground because of the position. It'll make more sense once we get a little further. Remember to go back down and fade off the bottom. That way we don't have just this floating set of mountains in the background. Remember to use plenty of water. This is mostly all water, just a little bit of value, and just getting that change in value, okay? I'm gonna pretty much call that it on that side, okay? So from here, what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna check, see how dry we are. We need this to be dry again. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna speed this up for us a little bit. Okay, now we're dry. And we're gonna go into another layer of mountains, but we've got to up our value a little bit. So we've got to go a shade darker than this, still darker than this, but we've got to go a little bit darker than that, okay? So still heavily watered, but now we're gonna try and get a little more concentrated on our value, on our watercolor. That's too concentrated. We gotta lighten that up. Remember, I'm trying to fade out the bottom too with just water. I just don't want that harsh line at the bottom. Remember, this is kind of a quick process. Watercolor can sometimes not be very forgiving. So you have to make sure that you are trying to be smarter than the watercolor. Work quick when needed. Sometimes you have those mistakes. You've got to work through them. If you notice, I'm not grabbing any more black right now because I've got plenty from this mistake I just made. And I'm trying to hydrate the area and spread this out. You can't just stay in that one spot. You'll chew right through the paper if you stay in that one spot for too long. I'm just going to drag this right off the paper here. I think I fixed it pretty well. Everybody makes mistakes. It's okay. It's part of the process. And in my classroom, what I've started telling my students, because so many are afraid to make a mistake, they assume that I'm looking for perfection, and I'm not. So I've started talking about progress, not perfection. So that's what I'm looking for. You always try and find a way to help, and I want to be helpful to my students. And part of it is confidence. So a lot of students come in without the confidence, believe that they are not worthy of this process called art, and it's not the case. I'm not looking for perfection because I am far from it. I am looking for progress. I have not been doing watercolors all my life. I'll be honest with you, I've never really done watercolors before. This is probably my, 10th time doing some watercolors ever that I can remember. So, all right. So now that we've got this part of we've got some on this side, we're gonna put a little bit on this side, and then we've got one more layer after this. So we're starting to shape up, we're starting to get these multiple layers of mountain ranges in. Come over here, add some. Remember, try and keep your brush going vertical, up and down all times. That'll help with the tree line image if we're trying to achieve trees. I got this idea from a photograph online. It said it was a Chinese feng shui picture of some cherry blossoms with this mountain range in the background. I thought I'd give it a shot, see if I was able to do this. Typically the cherry blossom is a Chinese cherry blossom, a Japanese cherry blossom tree. Okay, so I've got a couple layers in. I've got one more layer to do. I'm going to speed up the process again. All right, so this layer is going to be our darkest layer for our background. It's going to be our darkest layer. We got to make sure we pick up a little bit more black than what we had before, but we also don't want it completely pure black, and we'll get into that in a minute on why. So I'm going to put in, see, that's too pure black. Gotta go darker, but not that dark. When you get a mistake like that and you lay down too much of a color that you don't want, you have to hurry up and rinse your brush off and then grab more water to fix that. And you're shaping these trees, so you get some of that creative freedom of where do you want these trees to be? How tall do you want them to be? Okay, so now we're done with our background. Next step will be putting in our branches. But this is our foggy mountain range background.